This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. This is Nanette Bartow back with another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. We're going to start with some housekeeping again real quick, just as we did last week. I'm going to turn to my presentation at this point in time. It looks like last week was actually an extremely interesting week for me. One of the chaotic situations that I had was that I had returned to my PowerPoint presentation last Tuesday in order to do some research and complete some information in it, and found that about 700 of my slides were missing the images that had been put in there, which had been in there for years, quite frankly. I've been using PowerPoint presentation to do handwriting examinations and demonstrative evidence for courtrooms for, gosh, I'm going to say 10, 12 years now. And I have never seen something like that ever happen. It has actually happened to the Zodiac presentation once before, but it has never happened to any other case that I've ever worked on. So I always find that strange. And again, another one of those oddities that occur around the Zodiac case. At the same time, I was attempting to have a conversation about the new information that we're going to be talking about today with Harriette this last week. And I was on a brand new phone pretty much. It's only a few months old. It holds a charge on a normal for about 2 to 3 days. I use it for my business from Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And I've never even so much as seen the thing go completely dead, even after a busy day's work. So in the middle of this phone call, I had just taken it off the charger from being on overnight. It had a full charge. And in the middle of that conversation with Harriette, my phone not only dropped the call, but had died completely within about a half an hour. Again, just another one of those strange things in this case. I wanted to bring everybody up to date. We talked last week about me looking to see if there was the Valentine's Day connection in the Zodiac case. And one of the YouTube commenters had actually brought to my attention these two stickers that we're seeing here on the screen, which is the thinking of you and have a nice day. Now, these particular stickers were sent to Paul Avery in a Halloween card by the Zodiac Killer. So we are again giving a little bit of information that we haven't gotten to yet. And I had long since forgotten about these stickers because I've not moved back through the Zodiac presentation as I've done with these other cases as we've gone along. So I wanted to bring that up and let everybody take a look at these stickers. We see one that says thinking of you and one that says have a nice day. So the gist of that is that over here in this article, we see that in the murder of the Navy radioman Johnny Ray Swindle, we see on the ledge of the retaining wall, police found a box of Valentine candy. Police assume the Swindles bought the candy while on their stroll, but they said it could have been left behind as a deranged killer's calling card. Now, had they bought it and had it themselves, then of course the Zodiac taking something from it and then applying it to another crime is going to be Zodiac 101, again tying those type of things in. We can see that they are red, white, and pink stickers. They have hearts around them in the thinking of you box. Again, very Valentine Day-ish. So I would say that is likely an affirmative. And we know that Paul Avery was the investigative reporter on the Zodiac case that took the information down south to let these other individuals know that there's a possibility the Zodiac was actually their suspect. So this may have been one of those clues. I do not know. But I did want to bring that up because commenter, like I said, CD had brought it to my attention, and we had begun doing the research on it this last week. So I always like to quote NCIS and Leroy Jethro Gibbs, rule number 39. There are no such things as coincidences. So if this Valentine sticker, in fact, came from the Swindles candy box, which should be something that they should still have in police custody as far as the evidence concerned in that crime, they should be able to track something like that and determine whether or not that box of candy actually had these stickers in it. Oh, goodness. Let me get over here, move forward. Now, as I'm searching for that, CD sends me a link to this particular communication that's being looked at by a message board as a considered Zodiac communication, though they are back and forth on the board about it. Some say it is, some say it's a good read, some say it's something to investigate, others say probably not the Zodiac. But let's put some of that in perspective real quick. So we see a greeting card that's sent threatening a U.S. senator. His name is George V. Voinovich, and it's sent December 19th of 2000, which is a bit out of the range from where we're at. So we'll do some more in-depth talking about it at a later date. I just want to brief everyone on it because we do see that that greeting card says thinking of you, which is consistent with the sticker sent to Paul Avery. Now, the gist of this, it threatens a U.S. senator. It uses racial remarks like, hey, you stinking white bitch. This author is often writing about the real story that needs to be told. So I saw this down at the bottom that says, we don't want no TV bullshit. So we know that the Zodiac has long since wanted his story told, not the story of the made up story that leaves everything as a mystery. Or I actually giggled at when I read it and thought to myself that Tom Voight had already done the America Most Wanted episode on the Zodiac, and that his statement, I don't want no TV bullshit, could also mean I don't want no Tom Voight bullshit, because shortly after this particular communication, we're going to see that he's writing Tom Voight. So it was a postmarked. It was postmarked in Cleveland, Ohio. This may be the Cleveland, Ohio message coming from the FOIA file, which doesn't tell us what the message is. So this may very well be that card. I'm not exactly sure, though. I don't know why it would be in the FOIA file, because as far as I could tell, the FBI shut their file down in 1991. Either way, I found that aside from the rude white bitch statement, he also said those bastard Muni drive. What happened to white people drivers we once had? So I went back in because this board was talking about some type of taxes that this senator, who is typically a Republican, has reported or has voted in the way of Democrats, which he normally did. So it wouldn't shock me that he would be getting a postcard, because it is in keeping with the Republican views of the Zodiac killer. Some of the things that I started to look at is like the Tim Miller letter, where it says the ones with hair and or all the ones with brown hair and who are white and look enough like her. And then he goes on to say no Mexican, no yellow, something, no. And then we have it redacted there for some reason, which may very well say blacks ain't killed by me. So he's letting everybody know that he is definitely a racist, and he prefers white people to kill. So as I ran through to look to see how that plays out with Jack and the Zodiac's beliefs, Voinovich being a Republican voting Democrat, and his life is threatened. Nixon's a Republican, and Harriette Suchet, who's with us today, is actually decoding messages that show that they're going to Nixon. Nixon and RFK being Democrats again. FBI was Hoover, and he's calling him out on a constant as being incompetent. And that's kind of what made me feel like there was some infighting between the FBI and the CIA. There's a mob and political affiliation, of course, with the CIA. Hearst is a Democrat, and he's actually, I called him El Jefe of the media. He really is the Papa Don of newspapers, and nobody, as far as Harriet informs me, nobody did anything in the news field without Hearst's approval. And we're going to hear from her today talking about the use of the UPI system of Hearst to get the messages back and forth between the Zodiac and the people he's attempting to inform. JFK was a Democrat, and he's telling on those, and these messages seem to be telling on those that are involved with his death. We know that Hillary is a Democrat, but she was a Republican at the time of Watergate when she was a young attorney. So why she flipped sides, we don't know. The mob actually controlled both parties, so I'm not sure that I really care to figure out what their affiliation is. And I mentioned earlier that there was another congressman that wasn't voted into office. He was just kind of appointed to the office, and it was a Republican spot, but he was actually a Democrat. So he ended up actually swinging House votes and things like that. So I also found some interesting information aside from the tax part of it that Voinovich was voting on, is that there was also a municipal light or power company issue, in which case, Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company wanted to purchase the Cleveland Public Power. And of course, Kucinich, which was the previous senator, which is who Voinovich replaced, was trying to keep that power company under the city's management and not allow it be absorbed by CEI. And of course, this it indicates that they persisted in making efforts to buy out Munilight and pressuring Voinovich into giving them the right to do so. So I thought that was an interesting statement, because we know that there's been a lot of power companies that have been involved with this presentation so far, and it seems like that keeps coming around with issues. And they did have something to say in regards to that particular greeting card, and it was that the Danbury Mint link of 1981 suggests that the Zodiac had visited that address prior. I have been telling everybody that I believe that the Zodiac actually would pick up paper, postcards, things that he would do on his communications in other crimes or at other times, and then of course when those crimes occurred in those areas, he would then mail that particular type of media right back to them. Also, another interesting point about the Voinovich case is that his daughter, at the age of 9, was killed by a van as she walked through a crosswalk back in 1979 during the primary elections, in which Voinovich was attempting to win the election of. So that obviously brought his campaigning to a stop. And if everybody remembered me talking about Senator Percy and his daughter actually being killed at the same time he's in the preliminaries, of course, this all kind of perked up my ears. So just kind of letting you know today that we're going to make some connections as we talk about these codes. The San Francisco Examiner, the afternoon edition, is owned by Hearst. We're going to be asking, or we'll be talking to Harriette about this. The San Francisco Chronicle was the morning version, and it's an NBC affiliate, which is an arm of Randolph Hearst. The LA Times is, again, owned by Hearst Connections, use Hearst's UPI wire system. The Press Daily and Enterprise, aka the Riverside Press, ran by the former FBI Howard Hayes, was a crime investigator, and he also used the UPI from Hearst. So Hearst and the newspapers assist this group by delivering messages for this underground syndicate back and forth, and there's a good possibility that these messages in itself was going to Hearst as well. It's assisting in disseminating the information, I find. So things like we see over here, arrest made in Corvette Concepts 1983 triple homicide case. This was back in 2016. Unfortunately, we've not heard a word since as to whether or not this individual was actually indicted or convicted of these crimes. So they put out a mass news presentation and of course, get everybody's attention in regards to the arrest, but then they make no mention afterwards as to what happened. And then, of course, they're constantly, by me reading these ads, they're making money from what I would call yellow journalism, because they're purporting this individual to be the suspect of a case that is not. And of course, you can't take that back. You can't unring some bells. The Texas Rangers are involved with the arrest of this gentleman in the Corvette Concepts. And I'm extremely concerned about that, because these individuals were allowed to, or were going to allow Henry Lee Lucas and Otis O'Toole take the rap for 200 murders in places they couldn't possibly have been in, just so that they could say they closed these cases off their books. And the Texas Rangers were found directly involved with that attempted fraud. So when we look at things like how they're making money on books, movies, magazines, they're reinstilling the cover up and the mystery of the suspect while protecting very dangerous people. Or in my case, is it them they're protecting themselves? I'm not sure. Either way, we also look down to the Atlanta, Georgia child killer. As I'm researching the Thinking of You card, we find an insert that WXIA TV Atlanta, which is one of the places that the Zodiac wrote as well in the Atlanta Georgia child killer cases, and that is also a Hearst Argyle television station affiliate. Again, there's just a whole lot of incorporation of Hearst in here, and editors, crime investigators, people in the newspaper. We're gonna see all kinds of different things today. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and bring in Nolan Del Campo. We're gonna talk a little bit more about some more Hearst connections and some strange happenings. Good morning, Nolan.
Good morning, Nanette. Good morning, everybody.
You told me something interesting the other day that I hadn't known about you. And after all of these years, I just almost want to hear it again. But speaking of editors and crime investigators, such as Paul Avery from the San Francisco Examiner, he also worked with Herb Caen. And you have some experience with the Chronicle. Chronicle. You have some affiliation with Herb Caen yourself, correct?
Yes, when I was in college, I won a scholarship, a journalism scholarship from the Sacramento Press Club, and Herb Caen was my presenter.
That's awesome.
And Willie Brown was still in Sacramento at the time. That's how old I am. Anyway, so Willie Brown is a good friend of Herb Caen. So Willie Brown introduced Herb Caen, and Herb Caen introduced me. It was great.
Nice. So with your...
20 years old at the
time. So with your background in journalism, obviously, some of the stuff that I'm telling you doesn't really shock you, right?
No.
You had brought to mind Dorothy Kilgallen, which we talked about a little bit before in the JFK era, but I brought this back up primarily because of the article that you had sent me, and noticing that that she was doing lots of things. Why don't you tell us what she was up to?
Okay, well, she was one of the most well-known journalists of her era. For female journalists, she was probably the top in the United States. She worked for Hearst Company. Her dad was a journalist as well. He worked for Hearst as well.
And I saw that.
So she was based in New York, but she had a syndicated column that ran across the country. But she also did crime research and crime stories. And she was investigating Frank Sinatra, the mob, and the JFK assassination. So
correct.
she also covered the Jack Ruby trial for the Hearst newspapers. And she was the only journalist to interview Jack Ruby in jail during the trial.
And it said she was on her way back to meet an informant in New Orleans. Correct. Yes. Which I then realized that when the book was written, the reporter who knew too much, that kind of struck me back with Bob Lord back in the early 1930s, who was found killed in New Orleans as well. So it seems that there is definitely some type of mob connection going on here. And you answered that. She's investigating all these people, and she's entering Carlos Marcello's territory at the same time.
Yes, she was on the trail of Carlos Marcello, who I just finished another book on JFK. It's called Not in Your Time by Anthony Summers. And it pretty much leads to Carlos Marcello as being one of the people behind the assassination of JFK. Definitely involved, but it also basically calls out the CIA and the FBI for not really doing their jobs and obfuscating and obstructing justice during the Warren Commission.
Well, I wanted to bring in Harriette Suchet at this point in time because I thought that this was a very interesting take on it after I read your article. Let's wait till she comes in. Yes. Good morning, Harriette.
Good morning.
Okay, so in the reading of this information on Kilgallen, I found that they actually had done an autopsy on her body and had misrepresented the amount of drugs in her system and what it was that killed her. And I noticed that in this particular article, they indicate that there was a presence of 2 additional barbiturates. One of them was Tuinol and the other one was Nembutal. So I know, Harriette, you've talked about Nembutal in some of these solves and some of these codes before I have ever even seen this word before. So this is the first time I'm seeing this word in print, and that kind of backs up your solves. How's that make you feel?
I'm just amazed because they used, from what I'm seeing through Jack's world and eyes now, they used the mob used Numbatol to treat the women, like kill them like they're considered dogs, to put them to sleep.
Isn't that what you said was in the coffee? Who was the gentleman that ended up running off the road after drinking coffee?
That was Lee Bowers Jr. He said he knew he had been drugged, and he said it was in my coffee or my food before he died, and he was trying to tell people, I know that I've been drugged, and that happened, and that and that's what made him veer off the road. So
in your solve, Nembatol was actually mentioned, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I thought so.
And Jack is constantly misspelling it. Almost for some reason, he adds a U, and sometimes it's just because I find it Jack did things on purpose. Yeah,
they spelled it. They spelled it with a U. They spelled it Nembutal.
No, with the U instead of NEM, he's often spelling it NUM, like he's trying to say Numbutal, and he's like stress. I just found him misspelling a word in the solve that I just sent you, which you said, go ahead and send this, Harriette, or
right,
what you got, and then I'm shocked because you're.
Well, before we get there, let me finish through this because I'm going to bring you in and we're going to start talking about those solves. So basically, some of the things that I wanted to indicate is just what Nolan had gone over was the New Orleans Mafia Don Carlos Marcello, who feared the results of her 18-month investigation for a tell-all book that would accuse Marcello of masterminding the JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald assassinations. It does show that Kilgallen died weeks before a planned trip to New Orleans for a meeting with a secret informant, telling a friend that it was cloak and daggerish. So obviously she knew that she was in over her head. They did indicate that the dosage in Kilgallen's bloodstream was a stunning equivalent of 15 to 20 100 milligram Seconal capsules, which obviously she did not have access to. So Shaw also raises, and Shaw is the author of the book that we just looked at the cover on, that two toxicologists who worked in the Brooklyn Medical Examiner's office learned and discovered the extra barbiturates in the lab test 3 years after Kilgallen's death, but they did not alert authorities. So again, we have some cover up. Also, the Brooklyn office did Kilgallen's autopsy, which he says not the office in Manhattan where she died, which is an unusual move because, and they also never explained that the Brooklyn office was tightly controlled by the mob and Dr. Stephen Goldner, who worked in that office. So they deliberately sent Kilgallen's body to Brooklyn as part of that cover-up. And he also indicates that there was a mystery man at the Regency Hotel. They've identified as Ron Pataki, a flamboyant Ohio newspaper columnist. I think that they've attempted to say was kind of a plant because she had basically dumped him when she suspected that he was leaking her information on the JFK assassination evidence against her. A couple last other pieces here is that she obtained an FBI FOIA file on Kilgallen, which I don't understand why there would be one on her since she's actually seeking out the truth, but it revealed that she was actually under surveillance, and by whom I'm not sure at this point.
The FBI.
So why would the FBI be surveilling her if she's doing their work?
Because people that put out information that's going to liberate us all are threats to the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover.
Gotcha. Well, that's definitely what the next 3 points were, is that FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was on the outs with Kilgallen's columns in 1955 when she traveled to Miami's Little Havana and interviewed the Cuban exiles about the hatred of their Cuban dictator Fidel Castro, because evidently we were still in with Castro at that time. Also says that she jumped at the chance to cover the trial of Jack Ruby. She was the only reporter that was actually at the trial and allowed to interview Ruby. And then Kilgallen actually infuriated Hoover in 1964 when she obtained and published Ruby's testimony to the Warren Commission. So it looked like she had a lot of people against her. The mob, the government, possibly even her own. Well, I can't imagine. And here's what blows my mind. This could have been the biggest story of Hearst's syndicate, right? I mean, who killed JFK? the Ruby stuff would have been something that would have sold her so many newspapers. Why didn't he protect her? Why did he allow her to go down? Is he part of the system? I have all of these different feelings, because if other people knew that she was investigating this stuff, then certainly Hearst knew that as well. Wouldn't you think?
Yes. Hearst had connections everywhere. Well, that was his job. I mean, he had reporters and moles everywhere. Yeah.
And Harriet's the one that informed me that nobody does anything in the newspaper field without.
All these years later, I keep on finding the cross connections, going back to Hearst.
and I have more that we might not get to today, but we're going to continue with those connections once we cover your solve. So here I have actually up the envelope that you have worked the codes off of this week. And this was the March 2nd, 1968 Dear local draft board number 58, which was one of the Dear draft board letters. This is the information. Now, this information that you have extrapolated from the actual envelope itself, can you tell us how you do that?
Okay, I unabbreviate. I've found, as I've done so many of these now, when it says US and then the 5 cents, to unabbreviate that, it's United States. And then you identify what's in the stamp and where did the stamp come from. You put all the information. And my favorite source to use is called Mystic Stamps Company. They will have everything, the date, the issue date, and what's in the stamps. And then it says who prints it. It says printed by, literally printed by ... Bureau of Printing and Engraving. But with this, as I was working on it, the one that you have here, I realized, because I purposely left out a part that says with Thoreau's face, right side with, there's a little bit more in there, and I'll try to just hold it close here so people
can't see that. Yeah,
no,
you can't see that at all.
So I had to add a couple more lines because I was missing some words, and then I ended up coming up with the rest. But that's where it says right there. I took that picture as is.
So now, how do you account? How do you account for the areas that are redacted, like this return address up here? Looks like it has a box put over the top of it. What do you presume that to mean? I mean, obviously the FBI did that before sending the document out.
When I use, I don't think that's from the FBI. I think that was sent that way by Jack. Because it comes out as when I'm doing this, I started looking what's the NASA connection to Berkeley, and bam, it's the let's see, I got it right here. Come on now, it's the space lab. I think it's the space laboratory that was created in 1959. Definitely working with NASA to help land a man on the moon. So
I can see that something's written underneath of it. And of course, in the Dear Draft Board letters, we see these boxes pop up over the top of
you're using signed it. The one that you're using right there, it says local draft board. The one that I used is the other one. It's the one that was below it, the envelope below it. That yeah. But anyways, but it's still you unabbreviate things, and then you
and then you give everything a number, which I just put up the new slide, which is where you assign 1 through however many letters are in there. You give them a number.
If it ends up being 813, I better not have anything left over. So that's why I always number, and when I anagram. But if you go back to that slide, I wanted to bring up something that'll be important to help understand how this is done. What I had sent you there, I found some more code keys that ended up having to be X'd out and then moved and create the rest of the message. So this is a process here. There's the code keys. The code keys at the top that were originally found is November 22nd, Kennedy, and then Palmdale and autopsy, those words, and Joplin, Janis Joplin. It's a friend of Janis Joplin that took the autopsy photos. So,
where did you get the Palmdale address? Because I didn't see that anywhere.
Oh, it's in there. It's if you remember the 1963, what we done a couple.
Well, I remember that one, but I'm talking
that's
about
what he's referring. He's referring to that envelope, and that's a classified Palmdale address. Even if you try to look it up online, it just says plant number 4E1. It doesn't really. You don't know the address. It's in Palmdale.
Okay, so go ahead and tell us what that message says, because that's really where we're at now.
Yeah. This core, the message of the envelope turns out saying USA presidential candidate, New York Senator Bobby Kennedy, your big brother, vast amount of traitors are to suffer the same fate when succeed, cinch, run, seize the White House, November 5th, 68. New York, enjoy a toast with 1850 rum. And I know the name of the rum, but anyways, it's John Edward Walsh II. Yes, the famous one. He was 17 then. John Edward Walsh II, Run Rose, which was the corner guy. Anyways, McCabe, father of land on human on the moon, Kennedy cadaver, November 22nd, 63, south to Mexico, west, then go up north I-5 to a classified Palmdale address, and that's where the lines are. Unless you go down there, you're going to know the address. I don't want to go that far. Anyways, medical photographer Marjorie Alette took autopsy photos. Now her girlfriend, North American hit shoeless singer Joplin, age 25, BB or Big Band Brother is signed by Columbia Records, yet was voted ugliest man 1962, University of Texas, Austin. And Joplin is a friend of engineering student NASA's Robert Abel. Then it's including a PS. Postscript. W. Henry Lambright, Syracuse University, also with the Brookings Institute, Northrop, Harry Lang, Grumman, Al Ibarra. Anyways, when we get to that, Lewis Research Center, ASPB Buddy, Pampa, Texas, crop dusting pilot, British Columbia, Canada, Dickinson, Brazuria County, zip code area of 77511, Detective Robert Gear, ... He's saying that all these people are going to do something. Benjamin Milwitzki's surveyor, January 9th, 68, robot camera, Earthrise, color picture, ... with Lang's 2001 Space Odyssey Metro Goldwyn Mayer backlot set are to credit 21st to 27th of December NASA mission 1968 of orbiting the moon, dubbed Apollo 8, with Bureau of Printing and Engraving, Houston, Texas, Giori Press, perforations 11, issue date May 5th, 1969, stamps from JWT, John W. Torrance.
So you came up with the acronym JWT left over, and obviously we know that to be Jack Walker Terrence.
And where I found that J was in the address. It says Selena, the way he's written it. I looked at that. That's also why it was familiar territory. I called you and I said there was a reverse J in there. So, and he's done that before, reverse J, which, he's embedding his first initial in there.
Well, and that of course brings me to, you're looking at this with an image effect and the creativity of the actual author, which is something that Terrence Batcher had been doing. So let's welcome in Terrence Batcher.
I've never eaten over half a box.
You've eaten a half a box? No.
Good morning, Terry. So it looks like that Harriette is also finding some interesting images or creativity in the letter writing, and I put a couple things up here because I wanted to ask before we go back and discuss your solve, Harriette.
Oh, that's
I wanted to talk with Terry really quick because I pulled up some letters that you asked me to, so you could talk about some of those Jack inclinations. So why don't you go ahead and tell us? I've got up here a couple things from Black Dahlia, and I've got something from the the Dear Draftboard letters up here. So let's talk about those. What did you find?
Well, in upper left-hand corner is the January, they call it the January turning. But if you look at that turning thing, it's structurally turrets. And that's one of the things I've learned is he did his thing. Pardon me, I got a frog going on here. He did a lot of his stuff by, Jack did, by arranging the structure of something to imply something else. So you can see that you've kind of got the word turrets there. You can imagine the word turret. Now, of course, in the day, and when this happened in 1947, they're going to not be looking for a J or a T. But later on, JTs come up all over the place, lots of places.
Quite often, yes.
You've got the big JT on that one. The rest of it, a person could go into detail, but I just plan to be kind of brief here. I'm moving over to the one next to it on the right. I'm just kind of reiterating some of the things you already pointed out, but you can see that, and maybe not so much on this copy, but on the better copies, and this is that so-called gasoline soak letter, you can see that a W has actually got a V. It's both works as a V and a W in the word follow. And he's put emphasis on the 0 and he's put emphasis on the W. And I think that's a Flova hint myself, but
right.
This is based on what we've seen on documents later on, the ones you're going to get to later on. So,
and let me remind everybody that the Black Dahlia stuff is the era of also Bauerdorf, who was an oil heiress who had died. And the gasoline, to me, is also a tie back to the oil companies.
Right.
If I can interrupt to make a point, it also looks like it says Los Angeles Examiner at the upper left of that Dahlia.
Yes.
And that was a Hearst paper.
Correct.
Oh,
correct.
Course. Yeah, of course it would be. But
so then let's look at the.
You really had to read, and though I read as much as I could find on the Black Dahlia case back when I was studying. It was quite a while ago now. And you had to find the right newspapers to get the right answers, and they weren't necessarily Hearst papers. They probably weren't. And
probably not.
It was kept from the public that they were looking for Jack, not the, and then he had red hair, dark red hair, and then that she had apparently was greatly interested in the Chicago lipstick stuff and got her nose in where it should have been.
Correct. So yeah, and we've already covered most of that stuff. So let's get back to. In the Dear Draftboard letters right here, I have the one you brought up, the Bureau Crazy.
Right. And we're always looking with him, I've learned to look for the Jack clues. I had a lot of fun with a lot of the self-appointed experts in the Zodiac case, I would say.
Terry, we don't have a lot of time, so I just want to kind of get to the message itself.
Bureau Crazy the thing that he's saying is a bureau would be a donkey, would be related to
Bureau Crazy.
You've got the word crazy. It's a made up word, of course, and so that's a Jack. I take it also as a Jack.
Definitely hint. A clue because
definitely a hint as a Jack hint. And also, I want to point out something lower right hand corner real quickly. See the word Trenton, and then your yes or no document there. You're going to find Trenton in a lot of places as you look around.
Yeah. Yes, Terry B. We've covered that one. I'm trying to stick to the images that you're finding, and to the Dear Draftboard letters themselves. But you did also bring up the rabbit inclination.
Yeah, and that would be Jack Rabbit. We find those a lot of those later on. He ramps up everything. These JTs, he ramps up everything.
He's trying to give out clues that this is by
right. He's laying a groundwork.
The word bureaucracy misspelled. Okay, when I did that letter and I called Nanette last night, I said there's a stenographic code in there with all the misspelt letters. Then you run it, the words. Then you anagram that, and it adds more details to the letter. Details that are definitely in the envelope,
which we haven't discussed just yet.
Yeah,
but
so I'm just amazed.
as this correlates to hidden messages, we know that the mob, CIA, underground syndicates were using things like books, newspapers, and magazines to send anonymous messages and codes. And we know that the FBI was scouring the Playboy magazines back in the 1960s for criminal activity, which kind of instills the fact that they were actually using media to get their message around. And we see that the DB Cooper used just that, and the FBI was formerly the Bureau of Investigation. So Bureau crazy back in 1960s when this was written, they were the Bureau of Investigation, not what we know today as the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So Bureau crazy seems to fit right in. Thank you, Terry, on that one. I want to go back here real quick. So you started talking about things like Able and I-45 stuff, Dickinson, Texas.
I'm throwing my hands up in the air when you asked me to do this, and I scoured it. And another reason why I said this is familiar territory to you is one of the other letters that is in the that map that says Tiburon. That's the map of where Janis Joplin just bought her property. So
wow.
And so I said, this is going to say something about Joplin and her friend. But I said, this is 1968. Yeah, and it comes up with it's saying that it's NASA's Robert Abel, who's also Janis Joplin's friend, but and he's pointing out she was voted the most ugliest man in 1962. She was bullied, but so was Robert Abel. That's what I learned about him lately. So he identifies with her a lot, and they are friends. But this is before she's dead, and Bobby Kennedy, Jack is cheering him on. Because he's in the Get Hoffa squad, we're going to get these guys who killed your brother.
Well, so I want everybody to understand that your solve in the 1968 Dear Draftboard letters is got some credence to it if you take into consideration that those communications were written by the same person who wrote the confession letter to Tim Miller. Because if we look in here, we see that he actually addressed it to Dickinson. He said there's more projects to come, and he refers to the NASA horseman Abel. So everything that you're coming out with a message on is later spoken about inside of one of the Zodiac communications. And then we'll note up here that in the left-hand corner, he's addressed it to Tom Humble. And in messages 2 to 3 years previous to this one to Tim Miller, he wrote Tom Voight saying, "Dear Tom, here's my humble offer." And he actually indicates to Tom Voight that knowing now as you do regards to the matches of DNA and points, he's referring to fingerprints because he sent in his fingerprints with these letters.
Those are
that I am the real deal. So that brought me back to the 20 on 20 with Harry Phillips to the DNA that was ran on 8 suspects. And Harry Phillips said that we ran it on those 8, including Arthur Lee Allen, because we knew they weren't the Zodiac. So my question is, did they also know at that particular time that Jack was?
Well, they know. Oh my God. I wanted to even card out there. I've done so many of these now. I got two little suitcases full of what I've done that you haven't even seen the net yet, but I'm looking at this and
well, from a political standpoint, let's talk about the information in the actual solve itself.
At one point.
Well,
go ahead.
When it brings up
hold on, Harriet, hold on 1 second.
Go ahead.
Terry, you said you had a point?
Go for it.
Well, I just want to point out that the coordinates where the Black Dahlia remains were placed, especially the longitude was 118.333 degrees. There's 2 subpoints to make to that. And the subpoint is that's a decimal form, which apparently the military was probably using in those days versus the old 118 minutes, so many degrees, so many minutes and seconds. And
okay,
so
we've only got about 5 minutes, Terry B, and I really need to stick.
118.
I know that, but I had explained to you before that I did not want to go into that information right now. We've only got 5 minutes left, and I need to stick to the information and the solve.
There's those coordinates.
Well, let me just point out right here, it brings up about Robert Eugene Gere. Apparently they did draft people into NASA's astronaut program. So he's a Navy guy. He's all kinds of things. I had just found out the day before, and I was writing notes because I'm working on the Texas I-45 killer victims, and I was scouring the internet to try to get any information on Georgia Gear, who had just been that she was killed, and apparently by Robert Abel. But Gear was also a Texas Ranger. So he was, all kinds of things. He, as a young person and growing up into adulthood, he was so many things. Apparently, he was one of the silent space buddies called up because you. So anyways.
That's what you were saying in this message, was that the multitude of these individuals had some type of relation to NASA, correct?
Oh, definitely. And Robert Abel later on is gone crazy. He's avenging his friend Janis Joplin, but he's in this mess, and he can't get arrested, and he can't get help. But that's
what is the message yielding in regards to the Apollo 8? Is this was where you had talked about some
there was a problem
photograph.
Taking pictures. They were finding for several years when they would try to send back pictures from the moon or orbiting the moon that it was blurry and pixelated. So they finally perfected a color camera version, and that was Benjamin Milewski, who I believe is connected to the space labs in Berkeley. Anyways, it was his surveyor that took the color picture. So, but we don't know if one of the astronauts was there telling the camera, take this picture. So the surveyor was on the moon at a stable point in the moon and took a clear picture. So they did some trickery to make it, because they were going to credit the Apollo 8, who were going to circle the moon. But if you can imagine, you're going 1,000,000 miles an hour and you're in this weightless environment and you're jerking around, you're not going to take a clear picture from.
Correct.
But I'm sure they did take pictures and study it. But so they are just saying that they're going to credit the Apollo 8 mission people with the Earthrise, which they were in that mission. There was hundreds of people in that mission.
Go
ahead. No, go ahead, Nolan.
Which led to them faking the moon landing.
No, I know this is going to give a lot of people, see, we told you. No, there was just problems. I did so much reading. I told Nanette over the phone, there was several pages that I was reading to understand about Ronald Bracewell, who is also, he's not listed in this list, but he was, to understand what I might find in some of these solves, I had to read 20 pages of gobbledygook.
Because let's go ahead. We've just got a couple minutes left, or 1 minute left at this point. Is there any last minute thoughts or ideas? We know that this is definitely revolving around the media. We know that they are on a fast track to try and be the first on the moon, or to show that they've been to the moon. So we've got people doctoring images and the news reporting things that are sensationalistic. Again, yellow journalism. They just want to sell newspapers. Anybody have anything to add to that?
I have one last. Go ahead.
I just want to say 333. Be looking for 3 hints. That's usually when you find 1 or 2 things, you might want to look for the third sister and a hint. That's what I'm seeing with the stuff I've looked at. At least 3 hints. He reiterated with 3 hints. But that's all I have. Go ahead.
Gotcha.
Well, for me, I wanted to point out that if Bobby Kennedy had lived on, there would be no Zodiac cases. That's what I'm seeing. If he would, because Jack is sure he's going to make it into the presidency. If he lived on.
All right, Nolan, got a couple seconds for.
My last point is going back to Kilgallen and Jack Ruby. Who was Jack Ruby's lawyer? Melvin Belli. Who did the Zodiac want to talk to? The lawyer, Melvin Belli.
Actually, and I would like to add to that the fake fraudulent call that came from Napa State Hospital, the caller indicated that he would talk to Dunbar and tell him about being the Zodiac if he had Melvin Belli or F. Lee Bailey on the show to do it. And Melvin Belli actually appeared on the Dunbar show, and that fake phone call came in. And of course, we'll talk about that later at another time. But you guys are all wonderful. Thank you for all of your insight. Everybody take care.
Nice to see your face, Terry B.
Well, I'm hiding too. I'm scared of this stuff a little bit too. So you guys have more courage than I do that way.
All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you next week. Exactly. Bye. Bye.